Aloha mai kako. My name is Walter Kawaiʻaia, and I'd like to introduce the hostess of the day, Pohai Souza. We're here at her lovely home at Paiko, right on the beach. And we wanted to share or just talk story a little bit about our ali'i and the song that was performed, a composition by Kahanu Lake entitled Pualeilani, which was the home or the Waikiki home for Prince Kuhiō Kalanianaʻole and his consort wife Elizabeth Kahanu. And we just want to talk story about that and how it came to be that the song was written. So maybe we can, Pohai, you can lead us in the talk story a little bit about Kuhiō, and perhaps we can start at Pualeilani and how, was that his property? Was that his home? Or how did he come to get Pualeilani?
Yeah. Actually, Pualeilani belonged to Kuhiō Kalanianaʻole, and that property, when Prince Kuhio came back from his trip to, I believe he was in Africa and on safari, he came back and needed a place to live, so Kuhiō Kalanianaʻole granted him the property at Waikiki, right at Hamohamo, right where the Kealohilani pier was. And so that's where he built Pualeilani for himself and his wife Kahanu. And after Lili'u passes away, he petitions the court to get the property from the Kuhiō Kalani estate and wins that petition. And so he then has Pualeilani, and yeah.
So was this prior to his being the second delegate to Congress, or was this during that time period?
Actually, pretty much during that time period. It is right after he gets back to Hawaii, and also up into the time that he becomes the second delegate, because Robert Wilcox was the very first delegate, and so he was then elected the second delegate. But he was so popular that he just kept getting elected time and time again until he passes away in 1921. And it's so funny because this particular song, Pualeilani, is one of his campaign songs, right? And so what I'd like to talk about, too, is the poetry in this particular song. The poet is someone named Kalihivaina, and you can find that in the newspaper Ku'oko'a. And Uncle Kay did his research, and so many of these newspaper articles and mele are found at the Hawaii State Archives. So we want to thank them as a repository for having all of this information. But in this particular song, the poetry of Pualeilani is so, so very beautiful. Hula people like us, we get so excited when we see something like this, because not only does he weave all of the islands in, he starts off, though, he says, "Eoi kavehi o Pualeilani." So you are the adornment of Pualeilani. And then he goes on and he strategically puts in all of these lei-making terms in the song, like haku, uahaku ia, right? And then he also talks about a uo, right? Uo is when you tie a bunch of things together to make a lei. People that make horse leis, they're so used to that, where you tie all of these beautiful flowers together, and then you use them in these big bundles, very much like what you do for feather making too, when you tie all these feathers together and then you use it. So uo is that type of lei making. And so he weaves all of these lei making terms And then at the very end, he says, answer to your lei, right? This lei that you have had since kawau'i, from the time of your youth, right? From the time when you were handsome. But in other words, this honor that you have been given as a delegate is something of a birthright for you, because he is of ali'i status, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little mo'oku ao about Kalanianaʻole. So he had two other siblings, and
Right.
Edward Kiliahonui, and the other was David Kawananakoa.
Kawananakoa.
So those were the Kawananakoa, Kalanianaʻole, and Kiliahonui.
Yeah.
And they're all buried up at Mauna Ala in the Kalakaua crypt.
Right.
What was their association with Kalakaua and Kapi'olani, those three boys?
They were nephews. Okay.
Of Kapi'olani?
Kapi'olani's sister is their mother, and she marries Pi'ikoi from
David
Kauai.
Pi'ikoi.
Yeah, and the other thing too, when we talked about in this song Pualeilani, how we bring in all of the islands. Normally in other songs like Kaulana Napua and things like that, you bring in the Big Island first, and then Maui,
Right,
and
the
then
order is different
yeah.
in this one.
The order is different, and the order belongs specifically to Kuhio, because you bring in Kauai first,
Kalanipo,
which
right.
is his birthplace, right? And then you bring in Oahu, which is where he lives most of his life. And then Maui and Hawaii
Keawe.
are kind of like, okay.
Afterthoughts?
Well, yes, afterthoughts, but the fact that, all of these people, that's,
Well,
what
it's
this campaign.
identifying protocol, place of
and-
birth,
and-
where he lives.
And making sure that all of these people are then backing, Kuhio for his running as a delegate to Congress.
So we talked about his wife.
Mm-hmm.
So you were telling me earlier, his wife, she was of royal blood, obviously.
Yeah.
But she was more of a, what was the term you used?
She was
ward?
a ward. She was a ward of Kapi'olani. A distant relative, yes, but a ward of Kapi'olani. So how they actually met is when Kuhio was imprisoned after the counter-revolution, right? He was held for treason, and he actually gets imprisoned. I think down in Iwalei is where they had the prison at the time. And so Kahanu, who is living as a ward with Kapi'olani, every day takes him food, whatever goodies or whatever, and keeps him company.
Takes her with her, yeah? Takes Elizabeth.
No, Elizabeth goes.
Oh, Elizabeth
on
goes.
On the request of Kapi'olani. Maybe she knew, but on the request of Kapi'olani, Elizabeth goes every day. Kahanu goes every day to go and visit Kuhio, and that's how they begin this love affair relationship. And so they marry soon after he's released.
So I wanted to ask you, so Robert Wilcox was the first delegate,
Yeah.
and I think, and then after, when Kalanianaʻole ran, and he won, you mentioned to me earlier that he ran against his brother, right?
He ran against
Kawananakoa.
his brother, Kawananakoa, David Kawananakoa, yes.
That must have been interesting.
I know.
I mean, what do we know?
And they ran
was it
on
a
two
was it a
separate parties.
close race?
Pardon?
Was it a close race?
That I do not know.
Yeah.
That would be something that
And,
somebody can look up in the archive.
And the state archives probably has that information.
Yes.
So we're getting off and talking about these people, but I have to say, and Pohai will agree with me, that so much of, if not more than you can imagine, of this information is all contained there at the state archives. I mean, the state archives contains public records.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that anyone sees in Iolani Palace is on loan from the Hawaii State Archives. And so, I mean, there's probably more things to see and documents to see that are not made available to the public to see because there's just not enough space. I mean, between you and I and our communities, it would be wonderful if we could have an expansion of the Hawaii State Archives, not just as a repository, but, you know, the word discovery comes to mind. I'm thinking of, you know, my grandchildren, your grandchildren, when we're all gone, you know, it would be wonderful for them to have a place that they could go where all of these artifacts and documents that are right now just collecting, well, they're not literally collecting dust, but they're in the vault of the archives. And what a shame that they cannot be displayed. So we've got to get our politicians to do whatever they have to do, because it's really a crime that, you know, our keiki are not, this is not made available to them.
Well, one of the things that the archives is doing that we are so thankful for is they are starting to digitize a lot of the information. And thanks to Adam Jensen there, there's so much of this. Many of the pictures have already been digitized. Pictures that we have never ever seen published before. I was down there with you this past Tuesday, and we got through. Yeah, we went through a whole Kalanianaʻole collection of photos, and in these photos there were so many that I had never ever seen, and I mean,
you and I were looking through that, and
right.
I would have to say that majority of the photos we were looking through in that Kalanianaʻole collection, probably the public has never seen.
Yeah.
So I have to agree with you. You know, the times we live in through the digitization process, and thank goodness for our Hawaii State Archivist, Dr. Adam Jensen, because he's very proactive, and I mean, his goal is to digitize everything. Because that does two things, and I'm a little familiar with that role of digitizing. It preserves the original record, because in essence you're creating another original record by digitizing. But even more invaluable, you're making it available and accessible to people all over the world. I mean, you know, people, whether you're researching genealogy research, or you're doing some kind of school project that requires information, you know, primary source information, that's the Hawaii State Archives.
And that's a very good thing. The primary source, you know, information, that is essential for, especially for us hula people, you know, to go and see and press that button and see these beautiful pictures, but then not only see the beautiful pictures, but also see, you know, where it was taken, perhaps who took this, what collection it came from. All of that information is so valuable. Yeah.
Well, you know, this is the world we live in, and, you know, Hawaii is not unique to that. The archives is not. Digitization is occurring all over the world to preserve and to make accessible records just like that. But Hawaii is unique. I mean, when you look at the global map, and we're just a dot in the middle of the Pacific, but the amount of money that is being spent and the amount of manpower that's being put forth to do just that is going to be super beneficial in the long run. You know, getting back to Talking Story, you know, so I wanted to say about the song Pualeilani, because the question was asked of me, you know, what prompted Uncle K, Kahanu, to compose that? Well, he took that initial song, and he put music to it. He put Awana music to it. And I think, I mentioned this to Kumu Pohai earlier, that I think of all of the musicians during his era, he was the one that had the most confidence in writing mele for the ali'i. He wrote Kawakahiko. There was never a mele Awana ever composed for Kamehameha Paea. He wrote Kawakahiko. He wrote Ke'elikolani for Princess Ruth. And in there, her cousin Kaukini Pawahi is mentioned in the song Ke'elikolani. He wrote this song, Pualeilani, for Kalanianaʻole. And thank goodness he felt that way. He was very connected to those people. And there are things that I just can't share right now. But
but we should talk also about why he chose, why he wrote Pualeilani. right? Or not he wrote, but why he chose to go research and look at the Hawaiian newspapers with Mary Kavenapukui,
Yep.
right? It was for the occasion of the Prince Kuhio Hawaiian.
It was for the, and I think it was an anniversary celebrating the
Correct.
Prince Kuhio Hawaiian Civic Club. And although, at the time, our group, the Kahanu Lake Singers, which my wife and I were part of, along with the Lake Trio, the album, he gave it to Anuhia Brown,
Correct.
Kihei Brown's wife, who at the time was the choral director for the Prince Kuhio Hawaiian Civic Club, and gave it to them, and she arranged it for choir singing. He took them into the studio, they had it recorded, and it's on the Namele Auhau album,
Yes.
the tribute album.
Yes.
And so, thanks for mentioning that. But, thank you for people like Kahanu and, the state archives. And so, he was exposed to, he had a lot of natural resources at his disposal.
Well, like Mary Kavenapukui.
Like Mary Kavenapukui, like Pat Bacon, like Lokalia Montgomery. They were all in his circles. His mother, who was a Parker, and Kahawanu's mother, Cecilia Kuliakanu'u Waiale'ale Parker Waipa, was the first mo'opuna of Sam Parker, who served as the guard of the king's guards at the palace.
Right.
And it was Pualeilani that told Sam Parker, when you have your first mo'opuna, you give that mo'opuna my motto, Kulia Ikanu'u. And so took that. And I know we're getting way off the subject, but last night I was talking to someone, one of my students, and we talked about the Kawananakoas, he said, had a home up between 15th and 16th Avenue, a Victorian home that was the Kawananakoa home. I believe that's the same home that Kahawanu's mother was raised in, because she, being the first maupuna of Sam Parker, was hanai'd by Madam Alapa'i. And Madam Alapa'i, her middle name was Malani, from Kauai. That was her Kauai tie. So I think they added the vai ale to Kulia Ikanu'u for that purpose. But she was raised in that home, and Kahawanu has fond memories of that. But even Kahawanu, with all of the primary sources that he could go to, people, or at his disposal, I do know for a fact, because he would reference that when he taught me about the Hawaii State Archives. That was, and in the case of Pualeilani, with all of his knowledge, he did go to the Hawaii State Archives to confirm and verify, the lyrics and selected for this song that we were talking about, Pualeilani. So thank you, Pohai, for bringing us to your home and putting this all together for us.
My pleasure.
And mahalo nui for our beautiful dancers and allowing us to share story about our ali'i and the Hawaii State Archives and the invaluable resources that it is to all of us. Mahalo nui. Thank you.
Mahalo.